She tried to bully me out of my home like she did with everyone else. Silent threats, fake violations, and whispers in the shadows. But when Karen came for me, she made one fatal mistake. She underestimated the one neighbor who wouldn't back down, and I exposed everything. I bought the house on a rainy Thursday, the kind of day when everything smells like wet earth and new beginnings. It wasn't perfect. Paint peeling on the porch, a lawn that looked like it had declared independence. But it was mine. After the divorce, after the long months in a one-bedroom apartment that echoed with loneliness, I wanted something quiet, something I could fix with my own hands. The realtor called it a hidden gem in a stable community. I didn't realize then how much weight that word, community, would carry. The first week felt almost idyllic. Birds, silence, and neighbors who waved politely but never crossed the street to say hello. There was a neat symmetry to everything. Identical mailboxes, freshly trimmed hedges, even the color of the shutters seemed to follow an unspoken code. My house stood out like a rebel, no manicured perfection, just a weathered charm I loved. That must have been what drew her attention. I met Karen on a sunny morning while unloading lumber from my truck. She appeared without warning, as if materializing from thin air. Mid-40s, perfect bob haircut, pastel cardigan, clipboard in hand. She smiled like a dentist about to deliver bad news. "Good morning," she said brightly. "I'm Karen Sinclair, president of the Homeowners Association." She paused for effect, expecting recognition or perhaps submission. I wiped my hands on my jeans. "Hi, I'm Evan. Not sure we've met." "We like to welcome new residents personally," she continued, eyes scanning the property like a hawk assessing prey. "Just a few notes. We have some community standards. Fences must be uniform height, no visible tools in the front yard, and lawns trimmed under 3 inches. I chuckled. I'll keep that in mind, though my property isn't part of the HOA. My realtor made that pretty clear. Her smile stiffened, then reappeared like a reset animation. "Oh, I think there's been some confusion. All homes within Maple Ridge are under the HOA's jurisdiction." "Not mine," I said. "The survey map shows my boundary just outside your development." She tilted her head, that same pitying smile one gives to a slow learner. "We'll see about that." Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking like gunfire on the pavement. Over the next few days, I started noticing things. Cars slowing down near my house, someone photographing the mailbox, a drone hovering suspiciously low one afternoon. A white envelope appeared on my doorstep, sealed with the HOA insignia. Notice of violation. The letter accused me of having unapproved paint color and non-standard mailbox placement. I laughed out loud. My house had stood there since the 1970s, long before Maple Ridge existed. I ignored the letter, figuring it was a clerical mistake. 2 days later, I came home to find a woman crouched in my front yard, measuring my fence with a tape measure. "Excuse me," I called out. She jumped, muttered something about community inspection, and hurried off toward a waiting SUV. That evening, I saw Karen again. She stood across the street chatting with a couple I hadn't met, her voice carrying just enough for me to hear. Some people think they're above the rules. It's always the ones who move in from outside. They both turned to glance at me, polite smiles hiding discomfort. It wasn't long before I realized no one wanted to talk about her. When I asked a neighbor, an elderly woman named Linda, about the HOA, she hesitated before answering. "Karen's been president for almost 10 years, she whispered. "Things run smooth as long as you don't make trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I asked. Her eyes darted toward the window. "Just keep your head down, Evan. Trust me on this." But I couldn't, not after I noticed the pattern. The house on the corner, Empty. Sold last month. The blue bungalow across the street sold 2 months earlier. Every property went for far below its market value, always purchased by the same shell company. Sinclair Community Partners, LLC. I found that name on a deed while searching online records. Karen's last name wasn't exactly subtle. When I mentioned this to Linda, she looked pale. Don't bring that up. She has influence. On the board, the bank, even the county inspector. If she decides she wants your property, she'll find a way to make your life miserable until you sell. That night, I sat on my porch, rain tapping the roof, trying to process it. Was she really running some kind of suburban shakedown ring? The idea sounded absurd, but the fear in Linda's voice wasn't. I noticed headlights creeping past my house again, slowing, stopping. When I stepped down from the porch to look, the car sped off. The next morning, another envelope waited for me. This one wasn't printed. It was handwritten, elegant cursive. You seem like a reasonable man. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I stared at the note, felt the first sharp twist of unease in my gut, and realized that whatever game Karen was playing, I'd just been drafted into it. Karen didn't knock. She just stood on my front porch one morning like she'd always belonged there, dressed in her pastel armor and flanked by 2 clipboard-wielding minions who looked like they'd been plucked straight out of a Stepford casting call. "We need to talk," she said. Not a question, not an invitation. I leaned against the doorframe, coffee in hand. "You're persistent, I'll give you that." Karen's smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's come to our attention that your property continues to violate HOA standards. The fence is still non-compliant. Your lawn exceeds acceptable height. And," she paused, flipping through a folder, "you're storing building materials in plain view. That's 3 citations in 1 week. I laughed. "You do know I'm not a member of your HOA, right?" Her smile widened. "You're part of the community. And the community has standards. You'll find that fighting them doesn't end well for anyone." I closed the door. Within 24 hours, a city code inspector knocked. An anonymous complaint had been filed about unsafe construction materials and hazardous landscaping. I showed him my permits. He shrugged and apologized. "This happens more than you'd think," he muttered, before quietly closing his notepad and leaving. Later that week, my mailbox was knocked off its post. Then someone dumped a bag of garbage over my fence. The next morning, my garden hose had been sliced clean through. All little things. Just enough to whisper, "You don't belong here." I installed security cameras. Linda stopped me one morning while I was walking my dog. She looked pale, like she hadn't slept. "I saw your mailbox," she whispered. "Karen used to do the same thing to the Johnsons before they moved." "Did they ever push back?" I asked. "They tried," she said. "But then someone from the HOA contacted their mortgage lender, claimed they were in violation of zoning laws. Suddenly their rate changed. They were underwater in weeks." That was when it clicked. This wasn't about rules or shrubs or fence heights. Karen was playing a longer game, using the HOA as leverage to force people out. Every violation notice, every passive-aggressive attack, every anonymous complaint, it all served the same purpose: break the homeowner, then buy cheap. I dug into public records. It wasn't hard. Over the past 5 years, at least 15 properties in our neighborhood had sold for suspiciously low prices, often under market value by 30% or more. The buyers were always connected, directly or through shell companies, to Sinclair Community Partners. Karen's name didn't appear anywhere, but the pattern screamed her signature. I printed deeds, compiled transfer histories, dug up who signed off on HOA buyback clauses. Every time a familiar name popped up, Karen Sinclair acting as advisor, liaison, or temporary trustee. I showed Linda. She looked like she might cry. You can't stop her alone, she said. I don't plan to, I replied. I started recording everything. My phone became a body cam. I kept a digital journal, saved screenshots of every violation notice, every email, every absurd claim about overgrown weeds or non-conforming mail slot dimensions. A neighbor named Greg stopped me on my walk and asked why I had cameras facing the street. Security, I said. There's been vandalism. He hesitated, then leaned in. Be careful. She doesn't like being watched. Who? Karen. He glanced over his shoulder. She has dirt on everyone. DUI arrests, unpaid taxes, that kind of thing. She keeps it quiet, but if someone votes the wrong way at an HOA meeting, suddenly their personal life ends up in an anonymous letterbox. He paused. She showed me a picture once of my wife. Said maybe I shouldn't vote on something that concerned my lot. I stared at him. You're telling me she's blackmailing people? He nodded, ashamed. Not openly, not directly. Just enough to remind you who's running the place. That night I got an email from a burner account. No subject line. Just a photo of me fixing the porch shirtless, zoomed in from across the street. Below it, a line. Community standards matter. Maybe you should think about moving. The next day, 2 officers knocked on my door. Mr. Miller, one of them said, we received a report of verbal harassment toward a female resident. She claims you threatened her in front of your property. I blinked. What? She said you confronted her while she was walking her dog and made aggressive statements. Do you own a firearm? I stared at them, stunned. This is insane. I haven't threatened anyone. They were polite but serious. Took down my statement. Warned me that if it happened again, they'd have to file a formal report. As they left, I checked the footage from my camera. No one had walked past my house that day. No dog, no woman, no confrontation. It was all fabricated. She was escalating. And I knew I needed help. Legal, strategic, and fast. Because I wasn't just dealing with a nosy neighbor anymore. I was standing in the way of a machine that didn't take kindly to resistance. Hiring Julia Santos was the smartest move I'd made since stepping into this suburban nightmare. She came highly recommended by a friend who'd fought his own HOA war in another county, and won. She was in her early 30s, sharp-eyed, sharper-tongued, and had zero patience for passive-aggressive power structures. The moment I laid out my case, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Sounds like your Karen thinks she's running a cartel." "She kind of is," I said, "except her product is fear and foreclosure." Julia didn't laugh. She was already scribbling down a plan. First step, establish legal boundaries, literally. She pulled property maps, zoning definitions, and the original deed on my lot. Her verdict was immediate. My property was not still under the HOA's jurisdiction. Your lot was recorded prior to the formation of Maple Ridge's HOA by exactly 7 months, she said, tapping the printout. They've got no legal authority over you, which means every notice, every fine, every complaint they've issued is unenforceable and potentially criminal if they continue. Good. That gave us ground to stand on. But we both knew Karen wouldn't back off just because she lost her grip on my lawn. She wanted the house. That was the goal. And she was already using the dirtier tools in her belt. Julia helped me file a cease and desist letter against the HOA for harassment. We included documented vandalism, the baseless complaint to police, and the burner email with the photo of me. She insisted we also alert the county recorder's office and the local news outlet, not with a formal story yet, but a heads up in case this escalated. Spoiler, it did. The next move came faster than I expected. A manila envelope slid under my door one morning. Inside was a legal complaint. Karen Sinclair versus Evan Miller. alleging defamation, interference with business relations, and public endangerment of a community representative. The sum? $1 million. It was laughable in a cold sweat kind of way. Karen accused me of orchestrating a smear campaign, of spreading falsehoods with intent to devalue HOA property, and this one made me laugh out loud, engaging in menacing behavior toward the HOA president during her community safety rounds. I sent the whole thing to Julia. She responded within 20 minutes. This is a scare tactic, but now we go on offense. While she drafted our countersuit, I focused on documenting everything. I scanned more public records, zoomed in on suspicious property transfers, tracked LLCs back to the same address. A P.O. box registered to a paralegal who worked for Karen's real estate trust. I cross-referenced complaints filed by the HOA and matched them to sales that happened within 6 months of those notices. The pattern was undeniable. Intimidate, pressure, drive them out, buy low. One night I got an unexpected message on my phone. It was from Greg, the neighbor who had warned me about Karen's files. He sounded panicked. "She knows I talked to you," he said. "I came home to a zoning inspection notice pinned to my door. My wife's medical prescriptions somehow got flagged for misuse. I never even told her my wife was on them." "She's weaponizing information," I said. "She has help," he whispered. "There's someone inside the county, I don't know who, but this is bigger than her." Julia's contacts in city administration helped us dig further. Turned out Karen had two friends in code enforcement, 2 ex-board members who now worked as consultants on property compliance. They'd been cross-reporting each other's findings to justify action against homeowners, sending in complaints under fake names, fabricating violations. It was a well-oiled machine, and I was the wrench. We drafted our countersuit for harassment, false police reporting, and attempted defamation. Julia made it ironclad. Timestamps, photos, witness testimony, GPS data, legal precedent. But she also had a warning. "She's not stupid, Evan. She's arrogant, sure, but she's not sloppy. Expect her to fight back dirty." I didn't have to wait long. I came home one afternoon and found a police cruiser in my driveway. 2 officers stood beside a clearly shaken teenager in a red hoodie, my neighbor's kid, Jake. "Sir," the taller officer said, "we received a report that you've been recording underage individuals without consent and sharing images online." I stared at him like he'd spoken Martian. "What the hell are you talking about?" Jake looked ready to melt into the pavement. "I never said that," he blurted. "I told her you had cameras, that's all. She twisted it." I realized instantly Karen had found a new angle. Paint me as a predator. I brought the officers inside, showed them the camera system, the secure cloud uploads, the timestamps, the logs. Not a single file involving Jake or anyone underage. The younger cop sighed. "Looks like someone's messing with you, sir." "Again." "Again," I echoed. I called Julia that night. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "She's trying to discredit you before the case gains traction. If she can taint your image, even with a whisper, your countersuit becomes poison. But it's also desperation. We've hit something raw." I stared out the window at Karen's perfectly trimmed lawn. Her house looked like a magazine cover. Immaculate, pristine, hollow. "She wants to burn me down," I said. Julia didn't hesitate. "Then let's make sure she's holding the match when it happens." The courthouse smelled like dust and recycled air, and I swear the fluorescent lights were designed to make everyone look guilty. I sat at the long oak table beside Julia, wearing the only suit I owned. Charcoal gray, 3 years outdated, but ironed to hell. Across from us, flanked by 2 smug attorneys in designer suits, sat Karen Sinclair. She looked calm, almost amused, like this was a game she'd played 100 times before. She didn't acknowledge me directly, but her gaze swept over me as if I were a cracked piece of furniture someone forgot to throw out. She was dressed immaculately in a powder blue blazer and pearls. Her expression was that same smug nothing I'd seen the day she first told me. "We'll see about that." This time we would. The judge, a short, sharp-eyed woman named Reyes, opened proceedings with a sigh that said she was already tired of both parties. Karen's attorneys went first. They painted me as a hostile, unstable individual, a self-appointed vigilante who had terrorized the neighborhood with baseless conspiracy theories. They brought up the burner email, as if I had sent it to myself. They referenced altercations with unnamed community members. They accused me of slandering Karen's good name online, citing a Reddit thread I didn't even write. Julia let them talk. Her hands were still, her face unreadable. When it was our turn, she stood like she owned the room. "Your Honor," she began, "this is not a case about slander. This is about a coordinated campaign of harassment, intimidation, and illegal coercion carried out under the mask of a homeowners association. My client has been targeted not because he broke any laws, but because he refused to be bullied into giving up his home." Then she unleashed the evidence. First, the maps. My property line, established months before the HOA existed, showed clearly that I was outside its legal authority. Then came the violation notices, dozens of them. Julia read each aloud like nails into a coffin, emphasizing the absurdity. Improper shrub symmetry, non-standard hose placement, unauthorized front porch color. Next came the video footage. The staged complaint Karen filed against me, shown side by side with security camera footage that proved I never left my porch. One officer from that incident had even written a quiet affidavit confirming that the call had been unfounded and possibly retaliatory. The pièce de résistance was a surprise. Linda. I hadn't known she'd agreed to testify. She stepped into the courtroom slowly, leaning on a cane, dressed in a modest floral dress that looked like it hadn't seen the light of day in years. Her voice was shaky, but her words were clear. "Karen came to my house 3 years ago," she said. "Told me I had unpaid dues. I said I'd pay, but then she said it wasn't about money. She said my house didn't fit the new vision of the neighborhood, and if I didn't cooperate, she'd make sure I regretted it." There was a pause. Then she added, "My husband was dying. I couldn't afford a legal fight. I sold the house for less than half what it was worth." Julia moved methodically. She brought up emails recovered from discovery, correspondence between Karen and her shadow LLCs, all disguised behind P.O. boxes and third-party proxies. Financial records showed how homes were bought low and flipped high within months. And then, the most damning piece, a document trail tying Karen to an internal HOA email thread where she discussed targeting non-compliant homeowners and strategized about creating legitimate justification for forced action. It was all there, in black and white. Karen's composure started to slip. Her smile tightened. Her left hand twitched, tugging at the sleeve of her blazer. She leaned into her attorney and whispered something sharp. Then she snapped. While Julia cross-examined one of the ex-board members who'd flipped sides and agreed to testify, Karen stood up and shouted, "He's lying! He was fired for incompetence!" Judge Reyes banged her gavel once hard. "Mrs. Sinclair, sit down or you'll be removed from this courtroom." Karen didn't sit. She muttered something and sank back into her chair, face flushed. Julia turned calmly to the judge. "Your Honor, we request a formal inquiry into Mrs. Sinclair's business practices and HOA management. In light of recent testimony, we also request the court freeze her business assets pending investigation." The room went quiet, the kind of silence that isn't just the absence of noise but the presence of consequence. Judge Reyes nodded slowly. Motion under review. This case is adjourned until tomorrow morning. As we gathered our things, Karen locked eyes with me for the first time all day. There was no smugness in her face anymore, just calculation. When she walked out, it wasn't with her usual poise. It was stiff, mechanical, like someone playing chess and realizing too late they'd just sacrificed their queen. Karen made her move that evening. The email arrived just after 9, sent from a new address that hadn't shown up in any of our previous correspondence. The subject line read, "Let's be reasonable, Evan." The body was short, polite, and soaked in veiled threat. "You've proven your point. I'd like to offer you a private settlement, $150,000 for your silence. We both know trials can be unpredictable. Perhaps it's time to walk away while you're ahead." Attached was a draft of a non-disclosure agreement. Classic Karen, polished, forceful, and buried under layers of plausible deniability. No admission of wrongdoing, just a mutual resolution. I forwarded it to Julia. Her response came in all caps. "Do not reply. We record everything." She scheduled an emergency meeting the next morning. We met in a quiet cafe downtown, far from the sanitized hell of Maple Ridge. She had a small recorder running before I even sat down. "She's trying to flip the script," Julia said. "She's scared, but she's still playing. If we can get her to make a direct offer on tape, it's over." So we set a trap. I replied to Karen's email with a single sentence. "Happy to talk this through? Let's meet, just the two of us." She agreed, of course. I knew she would. Control freaks don't delegate when it really matters. We met at a boutique cafe in the Arts District, neutral ground, noisy enough to mask any tension but not so loud as to ruin a clean recording. I wore a wire. Julia, seated 2 tables away, sipped coffee and kept her back turned. Karen arrived in full political disguise, tailored blazer, oversized sunglasses, and that smile she always wore when she thought she was the smartest person in the room. "I'll get to the point," she said, sitting across from me. "This has all gotten excessive. You've stirred up enough drama to make your point. But the HOA is still standing. My name is still intact. And you're not getting a dollar from the court." I shrugged. "Then why the NDA?" She leaned in. "Because I want this over. And I know what people like you do when they get a taste of attention. You'll drag this out, get more press, ruin what's left of our community. I'm offering you a way out. 150 grand to keep my mouth shut? Tax-free," she added quickly. "Think of it as a community restoration gift." "Spoken like someone who knows her time is up," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't push me, Evan. I still have friends in places you haven't even thought to look." I smiled and finished my coffee. "Thanks, Karen. This was helpful." Julia practically sprinted out of the cafe when we left. "We've got her," she said. "That was an explicit offer of hush money during active litigation. That's a crime. And that's our win." By the time we reached the courthouse the next day, Julia had already filed a motion to enter the audio recording into evidence. The judge approved it. Karen's attorneys argued privacy violation, entrapment, anything they could throw. It didn't stick. The trial resumed and Julia opened with the recording. The courtroom went dead silent as Karen's voice filled the room, calm and calculating, offering a payoff in exchange for silence. The reaction was immediate. The jury's eyes shifted. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Karen tried to appear unbothered, but her jaw clenched tighter with every passing second. Then came the second hammer blow. Julia introduced banking records showing Karen had quietly transferred over $4 million across multiple LLCs in the last 2 years. Some of the accounts were flagged for suspicious activity, including rapid home turnover and inflated appraisals that violated state property flipping laws. The prosecution and the criminal investigation had been watching. They moved faster than expected. Two men in suits entered the courtroom as Karen's attorney sputtered through objections. They whispered something to the bailiff, who nodded and approached the bench. The judge read the note, pursed her lips, and turned to Karen. "Mrs. Sinclair," she said calmly, "you are hereby ordered into custody pending investigation for conspiracy to commit fraud, tampering with legal documents, and coercion of HOA members through financial manipulation." Karen's face turned to granite. She didn't speak, didn't blink. The courtroom gasped when the deputies cuffed her right there in her blazer and pearls in front of her attorneys and the press. Someone behind me whispered, "About damn time." As they led her away, she glanced back at me. No hatred, just disbelief, like a queen realizing too late that the peasants had torches now, and one of them was a software engineer with a grudge and a damn good lawyer. The final verdict came the next day. Karen's lawsuit thrown out, our countersuit awarded in full. The HOA ordered to pay me $800,000 in damages plus legal fees. Karen's companies under investigation, assets frozen. Outside the courthouse, I stood on the steps, the Florida sun hot on my neck. Julia patted my shoulder and said, "You just broke her machine." And I realized she was right. The empire wasn't just collapsing. It was crumbling in public, brick by fraudulent brick. The first few days after the trial felt surreal, like I'd wandered onto someone else's movie set and forgotten my lines. One minute I was fighting off a petty tyrant with a clipboard, and the next I was fielding emails from journalists, real estate lawyers, and a podcaster who wanted to do a 6-part deep dive on suburban corruption. Julia told me to ignore most of it, and I did. I didn't want fame. I just wanted my life back, and maybe some damn quiet on my street for once. But Maple Ridge wasn't the same anymore. The HOA board resigned en masse within 72 hours of Karen's arrest. Some cited stress, others claimed ignorance. One guy, Greg, the same one who'd warned me weeks ago, actually stopped by with a 6-pack and a sheepish apology. "I voted for her more than once," he said, eyes low. "Thought she was just tough on rules. Didn't know she was running a whole racket." "It's over now," I said, handing him a beer. "You're not the only one who got played." The county appointed an interim administrator to oversee HOA business until a full audit could be completed. That poor guy looked like he aged 10 years in the first week. Dozens of residents came forward with complaints, threatening letters, bogus fines, sudden mortgage hikes after anonymous HOA reports. Turns out Karen's reach had gone deeper than anyone imagined. One woman, Sandra from the next block, had nearly lost her home because Karen reported her to the city for code violations that didn't exist. Another man, a retired vet, had been quietly paying thousands in compliance fees he assumed were real. Julia and I helped connect victims with the state attorney's office. A civil suit was forming, a class action bigger than mine, and likely to bankrupt everything Karen had left, if anything remained at all. Sinclair Community Partners LLC officially dissolved under pressure from federal investigators. Karen's frozen accounts were now part of multiple active investigations involving tax fraud, wire fraud, and a growing list of state-level offenses. And me? I finally fixed my damn porch. Took 2 days, some new boards, and a gallon of stain. Looked better than ever. Neighbors who once looked the other way now waved, smiled, even stopped to chat. It wasn't dramatic, no slow clap applause on the sidewalk. But it was something. Linda started baking again. Greg offered to mow my lawn after my trimmer died. The new vibe was cautious optimism, like we were all waking up from the same shared nightmare. The local paper ran a front-page story. HOA president arrested in suburban corruption scandal. Local man blows whistle on real estate scheme. They called me a whistleblower. It felt strange, like I should have been wearing a trench coat and sunglasses. In truth, I was just a guy who didn't like being pushed. Julia got calls from 3 major firms in the 2 weeks after the case. She ended up joining a class-action legal group that specializes in HOA abuse. She sent me a thank you basket with a bottle of bourbon and a note. Thanks for not shutting up. One night I sat on my back deck watching the sun dip behind the tree line, beer in hand, listening to the faint sounds of kids playing 2 houses down. Peace had returned, but it wasn't the kind you get by staying quiet. It was the kind you earn by raising hell and surviving the fallout. I wasn't trying to be a hero. Hell, I'd spent most of this saga just trying to keep my sanity. But in the end, something shifted. Not just in the neighborhood, but in the people. They weren't scared anymore, and neither was I. A year later, my house no longer felt like a battlefield. The fence had been repainted, the lawn was in its best shape ever, and the porch swing no longer creaked like it was haunted by lawsuits past. It was a warm Saturday in early fall. Cool breeze, golden light, and just enough smoky air from someone grilling down the street to make it feel like a postcard. We had people over, not a big bash, just a neighborhood get-together. Barbecue, iced tea, kids running around with water guns, someone blasting classic rock too loud through an old Bluetooth speaker. I hadn't hosted anything since moving in, but now it felt like the right time. A sort of unofficial celebration, not of me, but of us, of this weird little suburban rebellion we'd all survived. Linda brought her famous lemon bars. Greg manned the grill, flipping burgers like he was born with tongs in his hand. Even Sandra, who used to avoid eye contact like it was contagious, showed up with potato salad and a crooked smile. It wasn't perfect. Some folks had moved away, still spooked or burned by what had happened. And sure, there were rumors that Karen might try to appeal something somewhere someday. But for now, she was still behind bars, awaiting sentencing on a fresh set of fraud charges related to an entirely separate HOA in another county. That woman had more hidden skeletons than a Halloween store. Midway through the afternoon, a kid tugged on my sleeve. He couldn't have been older than 7, with ketchup on his cheek and a juice box in hand. "Hey, Mr. Miller," he said, "my mom says you made the mean lady go away. Is that true?" I laughed. "Kind of." He nodded, deadly serious. "She said you fought her in court and won, like a lawyer ninja." "Tell your mom I prefer legal barbarian," I said, and he ran off giggling. Later, someone snapped a photo of me sitting in a lawn chair, surrounded by neighbors, beer in hand, grinning like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for a year. They printed it, framed it, and gave it to me as a joke. I hung it in the hallway under a cheap plaque that said, "In this house, we obey laws, not Karens." The new HOA, now a volunteer committee with clear oversight and actual ethics, had become more of a community support group than a governing body. They helped coordinate repairs, organized yard sales, even set up a tiny library box on the corner. No more fines for mailbox paint chips. No more patrols with measuring tape. Just neighbors, figuring it out together. I'd been invited to speak at 3 different city council meetings since the case. I declined 2. The third one I accepted, and all I said was this: communities don't die from loud people. They die when the quiet ones stop caring. As the sun began to set that day, casting a warm amber over the street, someone put on Johnny Cash. Kids chased each other through sprinklers. A couple danced barefoot in the grass. I looked around and thought, not about the court battles or the threats or the garbage tossed in my yard, but about how something rotten had been dug up and tossed out, and now something better had taken root. It wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming. And if Karen ever came back, Well, let's just say I still had the cameras and a damn good lawyer on speed dial.